Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most groundbreaking and frankly, kind of mind-bending business theories out there. If you've ever wondered how massive, seemingly unstoppable corporations just suddenly become completely obsolete, well, you're in the right place. We're going to explore the hidden forces that cause giant companies to totally collapse. Let's get into it.
Our source material today is The Innovator's Dilemma by the late Harvard professor Clayton M. Christensen. Look, this isn't just another business book. It literally altered how leaders think about innovation. It's a total game changer that forces you to question basically everything you think you know about running a successful enterprise.
And that brings us to the central mystery of this explainer. Why do great companies fail? I mean, we all know the stories, right? Massive giants sitting at the absolute top of their game, loaded with cash, packed with brilliant engineers, and yet they get completely crushed by tiny startups with a fraction of their resources. How does that even happen? If you think it's just bad luck or lazy management, prepare to have your mind changed.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The ultimate business paradox. 2. Sustaining versus disruptive technologies. 3. Trapped in value networks. 4. The resource dependence trap. 5. Capabilities become your disabilities. And finally, 6. Surviving disruption. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The ultimate business paradox. Doing everything right is wrong.
So here is the absolute kicker. Good management is exactly what causes great companies to fail. Yeah, you heard that right. It's not bureaucracy, it's not arrogance, and it's not ignoring customers. Christensen found that the companies that get disrupted are actually doing everything right. They're listening astutely to their best customers, they're investing aggressively in new tech, and they're chasing the highest profit margins. Basically, they're doing exactly what every top-tier business school teaches them to do. And ironically, that is precisely what kills them. Just take Sears Roebuck, for example. Sears was once regarded as one of the most astutely managed retailers in the entire world. They literally pioneered things like supply chain management and credit card sales. But at the exact moment they were being praised for their managerial excellence in the mid-1960s, they totally missed the rise of discount retailing and home centers. Why? Because they listened to their mid-tier customers perfectly. But that laser-focused attention completely blinded them to the lower-cost formats that eventually destroyed their core franchise.
Moving on to Section 2, Sustaining versus Disruptive Technologies, the two paths of innovation.
So we need to talk about the two main types of innovation. First up, sustaining technologies. This is when companies improve existing products for their mainstream customers. Think about a product just getting better features or higher performance. Established companies are amazing at this because, well, it's lucrative and high margin. But disruptive technologies, they are radically different. They're usually cheaper, simpler, smaller, and initially, they target fringe markets that the big guys just don't care about at all.
And this perfectly illustrates the trap they fall into. When a disruptive technology first emerges, it actually underperforms the established products. Imagine a mainstream customer looking at those early, super clunky personal computers when they were used to incredibly powerful mainframes. The big companies look at these new disruptive products, see that they perform worse, realize they offer terrible profit margins, and so they logically decide, hey, let's just ignore them.
To show how this works, Christensen uses the hard disk drive industry as his primary case study. He actually calls it the fruit fly of the business world. You know how geneticists study fruit flies because they reproduce and mutate incredibly fast? Well, Christensen studied disk drives because entire generations of companies rose and fell within just a few years. It takes this abstract concept of tech evolution and makes it super concrete and fast-paced. In disk drives, over and over again, the leaders in massive 14-inch drives completely miss the market for smaller 8-inch drives. Then the 8-inch guys miss the 5.25-inch drives, and so on. It's wild.
Which brings us to Section 3. Trapped in value networks, the invisible cage. So what is a value network? It's essentially an invisible cage. It's the nested commercial system or context within which a firm identifies customers, solves problems, and strives for profit. Your value network dictates your entire cost structure. Say you're IBM building giant mainframe computers. Your value network demands huge research budgets, massive sales teams, and giant profit margins just to keep the lights on. Your whole ecosystem is heavily optimized for that specific environment. And that leads to a fascinating phenomenon called rational rejection. When a disruptive startup comes along making cheap desktop computers with super low margins, IBM can't just easily pivot. For IBM to chase a low-margin product in an unproven, tiny fringe market, that would be financial suicide for their current cost structure.
So ignoring the disruption isn't lazy management at all. It is literally the most logical, rational choice a manager can make within their specific value network.
But hey, this isn't just a high-tech problem. Take the mechanical excavator industry back in 1947. For decades, excavators used giant cable-actuated shovels. When hydraulic technology first hit the scene, it was weak. It could only scoop tiny amounts of dirt. The big cable shovel makers asked their mainstream contractor customers, "Hey, do you want this weak hydraulic scoop?" And the customers obviously said, "No, we need to dig massive trenches." So the big companies logically ignored hydraulics. Meanwhile, hydraulics found a tiny fringe market, digging small holes for residential footings. And from that tiny fringe, they improved, got stronger, and eventually wiped the giant cable shovels completely off the map.
Okay, Section 4, the resource dependence trap. Follow the money. Here, Christensen leans on a theory called resource dependence. We all like to think that CEOs are these all-powerful masters of their own destiny, right? But in reality, an organization only survives if it provides what its customers and investors want. I mean, they're the ones actually writing the checks. Because of that, they act as a massive gravitational pull. A manager's freedom of action is deeply, profoundly limited by the very people paying their salaries.
To really grasp why big companies reject small disruptive markets, just look at the shocking math of corporate growth. Let's take the number $800 million. If you're running a $4 billion corporation and your investors demand a 20% growth rate, you need to somehow find $800 million in brand new sales this year just to keep everyone happy.
Now think about when a disruptive new technology first appears. The total initial market size might only be $10 million. Well, a $10 million market physically does not solve the growth needs of a $4 billion company. They quite literally cannot afford to care about it. The math just doesn't work. And the tragic part? By the time that disruptive market actually grows large enough to be interesting to the $4 billion giant, the startup that pioneered it is already way too entrenched to beat.
Which leads us to Section 5. Capabilities become your disabilities, the internal flaw.
Christensen explains this internal breakdown using the RPV framework. Basically, you can break an organization down into resources, processes, and values. Now, resources are flexible. You can move people, equipment, and cash around pretty easily. But processes and values, those are definitely not flexible. Processes are the deeply ingrained habits of how work actually gets done. And values are the strict criteria used to decide if a project is even worth doing, which is almost always based on profit margins.
And here is the truly devastating truth. Capabilities are context-specific. The rigorous quality control processes and high-margin values that make a company absolutely stellar at sustaining innovation, they become severe, crippling disabilities when that same company tries to build a cheap, scrappy, disruptive product. If you force an established team to build a low-margin disruptive product using their existing high-overhead processes, they will fail. As Christensen puts it, they are effectively held captive by their best customers and their own internal makeup.
All right, final section, Section 6. Surviving disruptive technological change, the solution.
Luckily, Christensen doesn't just leave us hanging. He outlines very specific survival steps. First, you can't fight resource dependence. You have to harness it. You need to create a completely separate, autonomous organization. Literally give them their own office, their own cost structure, and a completely different set of customers who actually want the disruptive tech. Second, match the size of the organization to the market. A tiny spin-off team can actually get really excited about a $10 million market. And finally, use discovery-based planning. Stop demanding flawless 5-year market projections for a market that literally doesn't exist yet. Assume your initial forecasts are going to be wrong and just plan to learn and pivot quickly.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to take away from this explainer. I want you to look closely at your own business, or maybe the businesses you invest in. Are the very processes and values that guarantee your current success quietly planting the seeds of your future destruction? Because what the innovator's dilemma ultimately teaches us is that to survive tomorrow, sometimes you have to be willing to disrupt yourself today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the status quo.